So, welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged and to another battle replay and to another siege battle replay at that, onto one of the sort of more generic siege maps that gets used, I think, for the campaign, although this is a new map, I should hasten to add, I think, for Reforged, and it's sort of more of like a fortified hill village than an actual city itself, but this is still a very good map to see, actually, because it's a little bit more open in terms of attacking skirmishers and artillery, maybe. However, the hills within the settlement, as well as the more open nature, also provide a lot more opportunities for perhaps the defensive skirmishers to be even more useful than they could otherwise be. But a very nice looking settlement, I have to say. Nice fortified village, and actually it is pretty much a themed battle as well, with the orcs on all sides coming to take this wintry settlement, or try to take this wintry settlement away from the men that occupy it. So, interesting. There's not really much else to say about this map. Obviously there are these little outer wall sections that the attackers will have to try and get their way through first of all, but then it's certainly not over, because there are several fortified positions that they will have to make their way through up the hills, lots of choke points, and then they will make their way to the highest portion of the settlement, which is of course up here, the town centre, right in the middle of the hill itself. But we'll go through the attackers first of all, and we'll go through the player who sent me this battle replay, which is Eclipse 2500 off the Dark Cloud. So big thank you to him. Obviously he often plays in some very high quality games indeed, and I'm expecting good things here as well, especially seeing as this is a map that I've never seen before, so that's always a good thing as well. And based on the fact that it is a newer map, there could have been the danger for crashing, but I don't think that's going to rear its ugly head. I hope not anyway. That would be a real downer on a battle, which I'm actually looking forward to. But as for Isengard, they do have some Dunedin clansmen here at the front, so unsurprising to see some of the lower tier troops here, a lot of them actually 4 units of the Dunedin clansmen. Of course, they're not completely free for the first unit like the other fodder units from the other orc factions, but they are better than those units because they of course have that nice anti-cavalry bonus. Obviously they have an anti-cavalry bonus on their spears, and the fact that they're Dunlanders mean they get a little bit of extra on top of that as well. So if there's any cavalry sallying out, Isengard will be in a very good position to deal with that, even with their militia. Pushing up the ram over here, we do have some Uruk-hai raiders, so the cheaper unit of line infantry that Isengard can bring. Once again, when you're on the attack like this, it does pay dividends if you're the orcs to bring maybe a bit more of a numbers focused army, so you can swamp over the defenders. So it's not too surprising to see the Uruk-hai raiders here, but of course in terms of quality they will not be able to keep pace with their stronger Uruk-hai brethren. Speaking of which, Uruk-hai pikemen, usually in a siege you'll see Uruk-hai pikemen or other similar pike units on the attack used later, because if you commit them too early, of course, they will immediately be focused down by the defending archers, whereas if you leave them for later when there's no ammunition left, a lot of pikes can be very difficult to deal with for a defending army. Uruk-hai pikemen in particular, because as pikes they are pretty good quality, honestly. In addition to that, they do have decent armour, so they can survive a little bit of arrow fire, more so than some of the more basic pikes from other factions, but it's still not a situation you really want to be putting them in, especially considering the usefulness that they can have as a late game force in a siege battle like this. And also it's worth mentioning as well that the other orc factions on display today will not have pikes at their disposal. They will only have halberds, so yeah, the Uruk-hai pikemen could be very, very important indeed. We also have the Isengard Ballista, not quite the same tour de force that it was in 0.96, but in patch 0.97 it's still very, very strong. The Dragon's Breath of Rune has kind of stolen its thunder a little bit in terms of the damage that it can deal, but the Isengard Ballista is still deadly accurate. It's still far more devastating to blobs of infantry than a standard ballista is, and in a situation like this you would imagine that the artillery is going to be very, very useful for Isengard to try and whittle down those defenders. Again, we can see the Uruk-hai crossmen over here, the principal skirmishers in the Isengard force. Isengard are always going to be more reliant on their crossbows at range than they are with any sort of archers. The stopping power that crossbows offer is going to be very important in a battle like this. Obviously, again, they're the sort of unit which probably best off being committed a little bit later on, because in spite of their decent armour, they can still be focused down over a long period of time by higher quality archers, but I would imagine that Eclipse is probably going to keep at least one unit back for later on. Several units of the Uruk-hai infantry making up the core of the Isengard force as well, so obviously they're going to be attacking in the main waves. And yeah, obviously the Uruk-hai infantry are a very, very competent unit of line infantry in terms of the damage they can deal. In terms of their overall stats, to be honest, they are actually stronger than a lot of the units from the Kingdoms of Men, which says quite a lot. They are also a little bit more expensive though, certainly of all the orc armies. Generally speaking, to make your front line, you're probably going to be forced to spend a little bit more as Isengard than you are as the others, which is the downside to this, of course. But still, should be very good in this sort of situation. We have some half-orc Baneguard back here, so some shock infantry. Usually you'll see the Uruk-hai Reavers because there are more of them, and they are cheaper. But in terms of individual stats, the half-orc Baneguard are superior, if only a little bit. Where they really come through actually is in terms of their defensive abilities. They don't have their armour upgrade here, but even without that, they do have a shield value. They also are reasonably tanky, so they can actually keep themselves alive a little bit better perhaps than the Uruk-hai Reavers. But of course, as an armour-piercing shock unit of orcs, primarily their role is going to be damaging the enemy as much as they can before they are inevitably silenced. And then back here, we have some Guards of Orthanc with some very heavily armoured multiple HP spears as a general's bodyguard unit, very, very strong of course. And then over here we also have some Uruk-hai Berserkers, really nasty. They don't have any armour, their defensive values are very low, so as soon as their hit points are expended they can go down very easily, but while their hit points are up they are an incredibly damaging unit of shock infantry indeed. And then, as if that wasn't enough, we also have the Nazkai, who have sort of lined up their blades in the snow in front of them before they go forward to pick them up. Yeah, obviously the Nazkai, pretty much the Berserkers, but with really none of the same weaknesses, but they are also very expensive, of course. Now we shall move on to the army, which is going to be directly supporting him, and that's going to be another Isengard force, this time from BMK Overlord, so we'll go through this one a little bit quicker, depending on how similar their armies are. For a start, some Orc Skirmishers, which I believe they can be used defensively to deal with enemy cavalry that sallies out as well, which I think was probably the main thinking behind bringing them. But also, in the late game, they could be used just as standard javelins if they haven't been utilised yet, because obviously if they go forward first as wargs, they're going to be relatively easy to focus down with arrows. They are multiple HP, but as soon as they're gone, it's going to be a big problem for them. We have some Snaga skirmishers here at the front, so some low tier javelins, which as I've said before is very, very useful. A lot of low tier javelins, in fact. They of course are very weak to arrows, but when you've got this many of them, are there going to be enough arrows to go around? The question remains to be answered. 3 units of the Dunlending veterans, which as far as line infantry goes are pretty much on the same level as the Uruk-hai Raiders. However, they do deal more damage. They have less men in the unit, so they're kind of easier to deal with from that perspective, but they do deal more damage with those axes, and also they do have a small anti-cavalry bonus being Dunlenders, so a little bit more utility, a little bit more damage focused, and I kind of like the look of them as well. They're very simple. Obviously they've been in the game ever since vanilla, but I do kind of like the simple chainmail and axes look that they've got going on. Uruk-hai Pikeman back here, of course, good for the same reasons that we've already mentioned. He's actually gone for some Trolls of the White Hand as well, which is good for a siege, to be honest with you, because if you commit them at the right time, they can really smash a defensive line to bits very, very quickly, and then the defenders could be in a good deal of trouble, but we shall see. If the Trolls are committed at the wrong time, they can be surprisingly easy to deal with. Uruk-hai Crossbowmen, some Uruk-hai Berserkers over here, some Uruk-hai Infantry who also have laid down their weapons in the snow just in front of them. It's kind of strange. I've never seen that particular glitch happen before. Nazkai back here as well, and that's pretty much it. They could have a couple of hidden units. There's a lot of rams that he's left strewn about over there. But over here, there's only one real way in, so both Isengard armies are going to be funneling in through this way over here. Then, back over here, we have Seraph, who's going to be playing as Mordor. So Mordor, some Orc fodder, obviously completely free for the first unit, but obviously that does show in their quality. They are very, very poor in terms of their overall stats. Moranon infantry, of course, not on the same level as the Uruk-hai infantry they're going to be fighting alongside today, but overall, not a terrible core for Mordor to have. There are a lot of them after all, and that is the main draw to playing a faction like Mordor in the first place, the fact that you have those numbers. We have some Minas Morgul's Chosen, which of course 203 units of heavy spears like this is a big boon for Mordor to have. Yeah, I mean it's unsurprising to see the Minas Morgul's Chosen brought so often as Mordor, just because they give the centre of Mordor's line that bit of solidity that you need alongside your basic Moranon units. And it does offset against one another very nicely, although the Minas Morgul's Chosen are not the best at dealing damage, it must be said. Moranon infantry back here, more Moranon infantry. We've got some Blackguard of Barad-dûr potentially to try and push through the lines. Just a single unit, but if it's used at the right time, very, very nasty indeed. Some Temple Executioners in terms of heavy swordsmen, they are among the strongest in the game. Only the Noldorin Blade Masters, I would say, can outright defeat them. They don't have their armour upgrade here, but even so, still a massive problem for the defenders to have to deal with. The Temple Guard as well, arguably even worse for the defenders to have to deal with, because they're not as good in melee, of course, but those armour-piercing arrows they use could be used to take on very important targets within the settlement. More Minas Morgul's Chosen. More Morannon units back here as well, and the Morannon Halberds and Infantry. More Chosen. Another unit of Blackguard of Barad-dûr, so I was just lying. There are 2 units of them. Some Sauron's Will, which are one of the more genuine damage dealers in Mordor's core army. Obviously, they are the slightly stronger axemen that they can field alongside the Maulers, but there's no Maulers on display today, I don't think. Some more fodder over there, but also some Mountain Trolls. So, not enough to bring the Olag high, but the Mountain Trolls can still fill that role of being a nice vanguard and a nice bludgeon to try and kill the enemy off. And then finally, we have Steward of Dale, who's going to be playing as the Orcs of the Misty Mountains. If there is a faction in the game which is more numbers focused than even Mordor, it will be the Orcs of the Misty Mountains. We've got some Goblin Infantry with the armour upgrade. Amusingly enough, it does make them a little bit tankier, but of course they're still a very poor unit of infantry overall, as you would expect from a unit that's initially free, although he has spent a little bit of money on them to upgrade that armour. Back here we have the Black Uruks of the Mountains, the unit in the Misty Mountains roster, which is more designed for... they actually have some ability to kill stuff, unlike a lot of the heavy goblins. The Black Uruks of the Mountains with those big two-handed blades, capable of dishing out some damage. A little bit of defensive skill on them as well, which is nice. The Orc Mangonel, which I'll be really interested to see how the Mangonel performs here. I mean, I can't imagine that it's going to be as useful as the Trebuchet that I can see just inside the settlement there, but I mean, the Mangonel's always a fun thing to behold. Some heavy goblin spears on both sides with that AP, some Mountain Uruk hosts, which of course, as I've said before, they're pretty much on the same level as Uruk High Infantry in terms of their effectiveness, but they are actually cheaper. So it does give the Misty Mountains a nice efficient unit they can use at the centre of their army. The heavy goblin crossbows, of course, much like the Isengard offering, going to be very, very important for the attackers here from a skirmish perspective. There are cave trolls and cave troll drummers littered throughout this Misty Mountains army, as well as some warg skirmishers on both sides. So once again, going for those mounted wargs, some White Uruk fearmongers, and some Goblin King's bodyguard back here. So not actually the biggest Misty Mountains army in terms of infantry, but there's a lot of utility here, which will be interesting to see if they can use that, because there's a lot of defenders over here waiting to kill them off. The wooden palisade, and we will go through the defending armies maybe a little bit quicker than I've been moving at the moment. We have Viper Action playing as Cardolan. We have some sort of Arthedain army in here as well, I'm kind of sure, but Viper Action is over here with some Dunedain captains, some Minhiriath men-at-arms, some Thieves of Tharbad. So obviously some nasty units over there, but most of what Cardolan do is made up of their more basic units. So the Greenway Garrison spearmen and footmen, those spears and pikes, make up a not very damaging but very difficult to break down front line for not a lot of money, which is one of the main things you can bring to the field as Cardolan. Civilians. We also have a Trebuchet over here for Cardolan, which could be devastating for that Misty Mountains position, especially if their Mangonel is lost early. Minotaur, Romen, Gatekeepers, which obviously the crossbows, in terms of damage dealing, are the main offering that Cardolan have. That stopping power they have is very substantial. 2 units of Minotaur, Romen, Gatekeepers as well, not bad in melee with those halberds. Minhiriath archers up on the hill, and some sharpshooters as well, of course, which pull out those maces in melee. Dollar Elf, who's going to be Arthedain, he's got some Evendim archers. Some Minhiriath archers up here, some Dunedain rangers, more Dunedain rangers, so a couple of units of them, so that's bad news for the attackers certainly. Some dismounted knights of Numinas, some Dunedain troll slayers, some Hearthguard of Amon Sul, Arthedain marksmen with the armour upgrade, as well as upgraded pikes, Numinas gate guards, marksmen, some Tharbad warhammers, some Wardens of the North, some Wardens of Tirn and Gorthad as well. Moving on, some Dunedain Rangers from Cardolan as well, so they'll have the Cardolan heraldry rather than the Arthedain one. But it's also worth saying as well that the other Arthedain army going to be played by Mr. Sneakman. He's got some Dunedain Peacekeepers facing off against Mordor, a couple of units off them. We have some Arthedain men-at-arms over here, some upgraded Arthedain men-at-arms at that. He does have some Grey Company in here, as well as some Dunedain Scouts. And actually, Mordor only have 1 unit of archers, don't they? And it's their armour-piercing archers, so they could really cause some havoc in Mordor's line here. They definitely don't want to be going after Isengard, I don't think. They are definitely best positioned to deal with that, but we shall see how that goes. Numinous Gate Guards, Fornost Terrain Defenders, so some Grey Company and some Dunedain Scouts, and actually he's got some Royal Courthouse Armlaith in there as well, and some Fornost Terrain Knights, so a significant cavalry force is going to be sallying out. We shall see how useful it turns out to be. Arthedain forces over here from Numinous Gate Guards and Fornost Terrain Defenders, Men-at-arms, and that's pretty much it. Some dismounted Fornost Terrain Knights and dismounted Knights of Anuminus from Mr. Sneakman at the top of the hill as well, but primarily he's got a lot of money bound up in that cavalry, and speaking of which, without further ado, let's begin. Because this cavalry is immediately going to sally out. Now, Mordor do have spears in their army, they do have the trolls, but I have to say, As far as an army composition goes, this is probably an army which is ripe for the taking for this Arthedain cavalry force. I mean, Royal Court of House Armlaith charging in will be really nasty. The Grey Company, of course, can shoot into the more congested blobs and really start using those body-piercing arrows to their advantage as they fire in. They really don't want to be going for the fodder, though. I mean, they did just fire a volley into the fodder, and they did rip through them like a hot knife through butter, to be honest with you. But, yeah. Both the Misty Mountains and Isengard, though, should be sending their wargs over here to try and stop this, because already Seraph is going to be under massive pressure. The Moranon infantry have no choice but to try and countercharge into the Royal Court House Armlaith, and of course that's going to cost them very dearly. They do manage to kill off a couple of the riders, but they're going to be taking grievous losses this whole time, and yeah, the wargs are going to be a very necessary thing over here to try and stop the rot, because you can see the Grey Company already firing away. The Blackguard of Barad-dûr are coming forward. In come the Royal Court of House Armlaith again after the Fallen Osterain Knights charging in. So this unit of infantry is already almost completely destroyed. And this is something the attackers can scarcely afford, because Mordor do bring a lot of numbers to the field, which is going to be necessary to try and make their way through these defences. And so far, Mr. Sneakman has done a very good job here with his cavalry, and you know, the Temple Guard are firing, and this is probably something Mordor was hoping not to have to engage in this early on. I'm sure they were hoping to try and utilise their Temple Guard a little bit later on, but they have no choice. They have to try and focus down some of these cavalry units. I mean, they should probably be trying to go after the Royal Court of House Armlaith, that multiple HP General's Bodyguard unit that is the most devastating unit of the charge. Having said that, you can see over here the Sauron's Will are coming out here to try and charge in. There's the Misty Mountains gate being battered down. But as I was saying, the Sauron's Will are trying to zone out the cavalry, which is, it's not great for them because they're unshielded, and of course they can just be kited back by both of these units of mounted Dunedain. But we should probably head over to some of the other areas of the battlefield now, as Mordor continue to get bullied mercilessly, because Isengard are making inroads here up onto the walls. I think Dolorel, he is coming down here to engage them now, but Isengard moving forward quickly and trying to seize the walls. It's going to be easier said than done, though, because the Dunedin clansmen are the ones going first, and of course against the Arthedain men-at-arms and Fallen Osterain defenders, the professional soldiery from Arthedain should be able to withstand Dunlanders like this relatively easily, especially with the support from the Evendim archers up on the hill. But there are Uruk-hai raiders moving in through the gate, and I wonder actually, Arthedain don't really have a brilliant defensive line set up. Viper Action has also come down here with some forces of Cardland. Some Minhiriath men-at-arms are going to block the Uruk-hai raiders from just charging in, but yeah, I mean, it's not a terrible situation for the attackers here. I mean, you can see here dismounted Fallen Osterain Knights moving forward, so maybe a little bit of a panic committal from a lot of these units over here. Dunlandin clans are moving up. A lot of these units are up on the walls uncontested as well, and they could get down over here and start surrounding this position, which I think is what Isengard are going to do. And yeah, you can see that the defenders are kind of scrambling to try and defend this palisade a little bit, and that's not good from their perspective. The Misty Mountains are also over here. You can see civilians actually charging out of the gate to meet the Goblin infantry. Both of the fodder units from the relative factions. The civilians can do more damage actually than the Goblin infantry, but yeah, it's not exactly the battle of the Titans there. Meanwhile, Black Uruks, the mountains, going up against the Thieves of Tharbad. Without any sort of range support, the Thieves of Tharbad should probably win this, especially seeing as the Black Uruks are having to sort of funnel in one by one from the siege tower. But the Black Uruks are not to be taken lightly. They're a decent heavy swordsman. Very important for the Misty Mountains in this sort of situation as well. Both of them are up on the walls. Minhiriath men-at-arms are a far more defensive unit in nature, but once again they are getting range support from further up the hill from the other human units closer to the town centre. There's one Black Uruk there who's floating in midair. Dunedain captains. In come the Cave Trolls. Cave Trolls moving in. They're going to batter through the civilians, and they would do a good job against the Greenway Garrison spears as well. But the Dunedain captains are here, and the Dunedain captains will do an excellent job against the Cave Trolls in melee. But there, I could just see there a stray bolt from the Isengard ballista nearly crash right into that front line. So just having a look from on high here, you can see more and more of the Misty Mountains forces are coming in, but the Misty Mountains can't actually sustain this assault for as long as they perhaps normally would be able to, because they've gone for a little bit more in terms of utility in their army. So it'll be interesting to see if that pans out for them. Meanwhile, see there the Dunedain scouts running around. Orc skirmishers victory is a distinct possibility, and I think actually, yeah, you can see the Royal Court of House Armlaith have been caught out. And unfortunately, as well as he started with his cavalry, Mr. Sneakman, it looks as though that the final embers of that particular fire are now dying out, getting perhaps a little bit... well, actually, no, these are the Misty Mountains wargs, so in the end, Mordor was supported by his allies' wargs, which is good to see, saved from the Arthedain cavalry continuing to toy with him. The Royal Court of House Armlaith now being given a bit of a reprieve. They need to get out of here now and try and run, because the javelins are going to start raining down upon them. Another unit of Warg skirmishers just cresting the hill there from BMK Overlord of the Dark Cloud. They're going to try and charge in, but that was a very tame charge, and that's going to be the end of them. And I'm pretty sure there's not much else left over here either. There's still some Dunedain scouts. I don't see a lot in terms of Grey Company either, which is bad news for them. Also, Mr. Sneakman, in his efforts to micro his cavalry, has pretty much surrendered the palisade to Mordor. The Morannon infantry getting out here. He has still got a decent defensive line set up, as the frames struggle a little bit. There may be rangers firing at some point on the battlefield causing that. You can see here the Fornos Terrain Knights in shield wall, setting up a good defensive line. These Morannon infantrymen and this one unit of Minas Morgul's chosen will not be enough to get through all of these Arthedain soldiers all on their own. They will need a little bit more support from the Mordor army, but now it looks like they're going to get another unit of Minas Morgul chosen. Some sort of damage dealer is needed, but to be honest with you, there goes the horses in the background there. Is that the Grey Company? It is, so they're still alive. But we did see the Sauron's Will get absolutely toasted by the Arthedain horse archers, so maybe easier said than done. Mordor, just in general, don't have the most damaging army. Still 84 Sauron's Will. They have the Temple Executioners as well, but most of their army is made up of spears and basic Morannon units. So he may have to just be content with engaging the enemy and slowly wearing them down, which, to be honest with you, I think plays more into Arthedain's hands. Over here you can see the Wards of the North shooting through the gate into the Minas Morgul's chosen. The armour piercing will be useful against them, but I think it's about time we headed over to the other side and see how Isengard are getting along. Decently by the looks of things. The attack is still going on, albeit the attack through the gate is being forced back. You can see there that it is a real cluster of a fight here. The Uruk-hai pikemen and the half-orc Baneguard working in tandem against the Arthedain pikemen, Arthedain men-at-arms and Minhiriath men-at-arms. I mean, with the AP here, and also I think, you know, the Uruk-hai pikemen are stronger than the Arthedain pikemen, so this should be a fight which over time goes more and more in favour of the banner of the White Hand here. But yeah, you can see Isengard now trying to go find different ways up onto the walls, and they should absolutely continue to try putting pressure onto these palisades. I mean, it is dismounted Fornos Terrain Knights up against Dunlending veterans. There are some Uruk-hai infantry making their way up there now, but this is a very strong unit of infantry Arthedain have, these sword masters. So yeah, very much easier said than done. But they need to try and make something happen here at Isengard, because that is going to be a fight which goes on for a long time. Even if they do end up winning, which I think they will, they need to continue to put pressure onto the flanks. There are still Dunlending clansmen that are fighting away, but up against Arthedain men-at-arms, and there's even some Evendim archers in here, struggling to really make any sort of headway. Dunlending veterans over here, 135 of them marching into position to try and support. More units should be making use of the space over here, I think. There's actually still some Dunlenders fighting off against some Arthedain men-at-arms over on this section of the palisade as well. More reinforcements heading down the hill. This time it's the Dunedain Rangers, so if they get into position to get good shots off, it could be absolutely devastating, and they are going to do so. Wearing the heraldry of Arthedain, these particular Dunedain. They're going to shoot into that section of the wall there. Now they're going to try and shoot through the gap. I mean, yeah, they're getting some good shots there, because the frames are crying at the sight of that. So they are getting good shots. We'll go and see what happens after that. Meanwhile, the Misty Mountains, with the support of those stray ballista bolts, Cardland did back off, and as a result of that, they have managed to force their way through here. The Warg skirmishers using their javelins, a combination of the Mountain Uruk host and the cave trolls, bludgeoning through a lot of the Cardland lines. Menotar, Romen, gatekeepers, and Minhiriath archers making up the front line alongside some Tharbad warhammers. Now some Warns of Tir and Gorthad, yeah. I mean, the Misty Mountains, you know, Cardland need to respond to this a little bit more seriously than they're currently doing, I think. Out of ammunition skirmishers, even ones like the Menotar, Roman Guardians, are going to need more support. Warns of Tyr and Gorthad do have that morale boosting effect, which should keep these men in the fight for longer, but sending in pikes to try and deal with trolls. There go the heavy goblin crossbows routing off. Another unit of Midhiriath archers. Trebuchet's trying to get out of there. There's still 53 of them. Yeah, I was about to say that Mangonel is firing. One of them has been destroyed by the Trebuchet. But I mean, yeah, like, you may as well try and shoot. I mean, there is a danger with the Right, well, there goes finally, I think, the Arthedain general. He's finally been hunted down over there by the Warg skirmishers. But yeah, the Mangonel here, it is an interesting conundrum for the Steward of Dale to have to deal with, because if he does shoot his Mangonel and it hits his own men, he's going to be in massive danger of routing his own lines. But if he doesn't, like if he hits the Cardlin force as well, they're in danger of routing as well. There goes, I think that might be Eclipse's general in the middle of that mess. That Trebuchet there is burning. It's a very strong card. I mean, there's not enough Misty Mountains forces on the front line left, I think, to justify not using the Mangonel at this point. There's a lot of congested points of the battlefield, causing the frames to chug along a little bit. Meanwhile, you can see here the Black Guard of Barad-dûr have been committed forward. It's a thin line of men-at-arms as well, but unfortunately for Mordor, there are more men-at-arms on the way down here to plug the gap that the Black Guard may make. But Black Guard of Barad-dûr, Minas Morgul chosen again, neither of them are particularly damaging units, but they're both pretty tough. And also that is a very worrying sight for Arthedain. They really need to be trying to kill off these Adunai Shadowbows as quickly as they are able, and I think they are doing so. Those Arthedain marksmen in a perfect position to spray down arrows onto them. I see some Temple units over here. Temple Guard up here on the walls alongside another unit of Adunai Shadowbows, but they're being engaged in melee by Arthedain men-at-arms, so not ideal for them. Again, I think Mordor was so keen to get those skirmishers into position, they didn't really secure their position enough to actually do that, so that they could shoot unmolested. Yeah, and as it is, I mean, Mordor are struggling here. Dunedain Peacekeeper's been committed by Mr. Sneakman now as well, so no rest for the weary from Mordor's perspective. Some very strong line infantry being committed forward, damaging as well with those axes. In come the Minas Morgul chosen. There's a lot of morale on infantry over here though, so Mordor have managed to sort of surround some of the Enuminous Gate Guards over here, but Arthedain have got a very solid defensive line set up anyway, so it's more of a consolation prize, I think, over here than anything for Mordor. Meanwhile, heading back over to here. Frames have been struggling for a little while in this battle, and it's not going to get any easier as I go over here, because the Dunedain Rangers are shooting right through that gate, and there were Uruk-hai Berserkers in their Guards of Orthanc. A very, very nice target for the Dunedain Rangers to try and thread the needle there into the Isengard forces, and Isengard have really been struggling to make any headway here, which is strange because initially it looked like the defenders have been caught out a little bit by a quick assault, but as it is, Isengard now struggling to make something happen. It may have been more worthwhile to make holes in this outer wall here and try and go about it that way, and I think maybe that's what the Ballista might be doing now. Uruk-hai infantry and Dunlending veterans over here trying to stop the advance of the Evendim archers and Arthedain men-at-arms. The fact that they've been able to get more men up onto this section of wall after having lost it speaks very well of the defenders, to be honest with you, but I can't imagine the Arthedain men-at-arms will last too much longer against these overwhelming odds. Dunedain Trollslayers in position to give support should they need it, but I think Isengard, they backed off a little bit. They're sort of trying to regroup a bit more before going again, because they will need to go again. There's no way that their allies will be able to do this all on their own. Oof. You can see there the Trebuchet, the Cardlin Trebuchet up on the hill, getting really nasty hits right into the centre of these Mordor forces, causing them around on infantry to break. Again, Mordor has been sort of the unfortunate one in this battle to an extent, in that they've had to deal with first the cavalry sallying out and doing some damage to them, and now they're having to deal with the artillery. Bit of friendly fire there, but mostly hitting the Black Guard of Barad-dûr and causing them to break as well, so Mordor's assault hasn't gone anywhere as of yet, and it will continue to be that way. I think the Arthedain men-at-arms are going to be defeated in melee, unsurprisingly, by the Temple Guard, but this does mean, of course, that they're going to be unable to use their ammunition for the time being, so even this really is a victory for the men of the West. And Mordor have a limited amount of forces outside the gate that they can commit now. Certainly not enough, I think, to defeat this Arthedain position. I mean, the announcer continues to say that victory will be theirs. Certainly not on Mordor's front, but the Misty Mountains, they have come again. Now with the trebuchet no longer here, at least no functional trebuchets here. The problem is, though, you can see up there, I want to get a little bit further away just in case of crashes, but the Cardinal and Dunedain Rangers are going to be able to shoot right through the Misty Mountains forces. But the Misty Mountains don't really have a choice here. They need to make something happen, but it's not going to get any easier for them. Dismounted Knights of Illuminus arriving on the front line, as well as some Tharbad Warhammers as well. So, yeah, I mean, Mountain Uruk Coaster in here, Heavy Goblin Spears, a lot of basic Misty Mountains forces, some Uruk-hai Crossmen that are out of ammunition as well, really trying to just commit forward numbers to smash this line up. But it's not really working for them at the moment, and I can't see any mangonels out there either. But I mean, the Misty Mountains have made it the furthest into the settlement so far, so they do have that going for them. While over here, I really shudder to think how many kills that unit of Dunedain Rangers has gotten, because they have been shooting into that blob for some time, but now forward come the Trolls of the White Hand, and considering that a lot of that front line was made up of pikes and basic units, the Trolls of the White Hand will be ideally suited for dealing with them. You could say, of course, the Dunedain Troll Slayers are on hand, but they're getting shot. Oof. Catapult there from Dollar Elf, trying to get some hits, but actually missing. They did hit the Snaga Skirmishers, but that wasn't what they were aiming for. They were aiming for the blob there. Meanwhile, these Arthedain Marksmen also taking up a good position, obviously nowhere near as damaging as the Rangers. But their support will still be very important for the defenders here to try and do as much damage to Isengard as they push through these lines as possible. Those Trolls have made the hole. Now, again, like there's a lot of these units are just a little bit too far away, though. That's going to break what was left of the defenders over there, in addition to getting some kills, though. There's a lot of... yeah, the Uruk-hai Crossbowmen and the Trolls now getting into melee with the Troll Slayers. The Troll Slayers in melee actually will be exactly the sort of thing to deal with the Trolls of the White Hand, as unsurprisingly because of their name. There's the Isengard Ballista, killing off one of the catapults. Oof, pretty grisly for... actually, that's the second unit of Dunedain Rangers. There's one in melee. Pretty grisly for Isengard, though, really having to march through the meat grinder again and again. Meanwhile, down over here, Mordor's fate has been an unfortunate one in this battle so far. The Temple Executioners now moving forward with the support of the fodder. I mean, the fodder won't last too long, and even the Temple Executioners, to be honest with you, in the face of this many Arthedain soldiers, I don't know, I mean, the Peacekeepers are no pushovers in melee. There's still a lot of healthy Arthedain man-at-arms with the armour upgrades. There's pikes in here as well. It really does not get any easier for Mordor. The Morannon Halberds have come forward, but again, there's only so many of them. Victory seems like a distinct possibility, which is amazing when you think about it. But that won't last too much longer. I mean, the AP is going to be useful, but they're going polearm to polearm with the Illuminus Gate Guards, and in that particular contest, there is only going to be one winner. Unfortunately for Mordor, Temple Executioners. Victory, almost a certainty. Defeat, almost a certainty. Victory seems certain. Yeah, I mean, Arthedain, I mean, to be fair, with the quality, Mordor can probably get a few more kills out of Arthedain, but they certainly shouldn't win. Hearthguard of Amon Sul have also come down here now to lend their aid. The Trebuchet has trundled its way back across to the other front, seeing that there is a far more attractive-looking blob for them to hit over here now that Mordor's been seen to. Although now, at this point, I have to say it's mostly Isengard that are over here. Nazkai are here. A lot of the Misty Mountains forces, it seems, have been dealt with. There's heavy goblin crossbows still outside the walls. Still a few Misty Mountains troops here and there, but not all that many, I have to say. And it's not too surprising to see. There's the Misty Mountains General, actually, right here, getting shanked by the Knights of Illuminus, passed around. And there are the Tharbad Warhammers as well. So Isengard are having to be the ones here to try and keep up this assault. But the defenders so far, you'd have to say that the ranged units for the defenders must have done work, because the crossbows, the rangers, even the basic archers, they've got really good positions they can take up in this particular settlement. And that, I think, is one of the main reasons why they've done so well up till this point. And they haven't been shy about committing forward elite units. There goes Azog. Body left in the snow by the knights. Oof. And again, the catapult shooting into the Uruk-hai pikemen as they try and force their way through, but those Fornos Terrain Knights just getting in the way, bottling up the Isengard army enough for this catapult to potentially get some really nasty hits. Fornost Terrain defenders as well. I mean, trolls will be really good against basic spears like this, but they've already had a lot of damage dealt to them, and there just isn't enough of them anymore. Another really nice hit, this. Very well planned out that by Dollar Elf, just sending forward a very depleted unit to get in the way of this army as it pushes through the gate, and then teeing off into the Isengard forces with the catapult, getting as many kills as possible with that artillery. There's also the Wardens of the North from Dollar Elf here. They're shooting their arrows up into the air, but they should still be hitting the column of Uruk-hai as they move through the settlement. But I mean, the defenders have committed forward mostly all of their forces at this point to get as far as they have done in this battle. Meanwhile, I can see that I didn't give the Temple Executioners enough credit, because they are absolutely dumpstering the upgraded Arthedain men-at-arms over here. The Dunedain Peacekeepers here also, but maybe the damage that Arthedain took was substantial enough. Against all the odds, can Mordor be victorious here and start making their way toward the town centre? They won't have much left to do it with, to be honest with you. A lot of the forces have gone up here to try and help deal with the Temple Guard. A Dunedain Shadow Bows still firing away. Firing into the Hearthguard of Amon-Sul up there. But again, I'm not sure whether that would be a significant victory for Mordor, because again, they wouldn't have much to attack the town centre with, but it would be enough to give the defenders something to think about. There's still a lot of forces over here as well. There's still a lot of heavy goblins. There's Uruk-hai crossmen there up on the palisade, but I can't really see this defensive line going anywhere too quickly. There are Nazkai in here. Oof, Trebuchet shooting there into the warg skirmishers. Yeah, there's a lot of polearms in here, pikes and halberds. There's a lot of elite infantry as well in the dismounted Knights of Anumnus, the Tharbad Warhammers. So it's a very, very difficult defensive line for Isengard to try and get their way through. But I mean, they do have those crossbows, both the Misty Mountains crossbows and the Isengard ones. The wargs, they're not getting too many kills per volley this time, the trebuchets, but they are dealing with those wargs. Another elite unit coming down in the Hearthguard of Amon-Sul. Another very difficult unit to break down. Isengard continuing to pour forwards. I mean, it does go to show that Isengard, they may be less numbers focused than the other Orc factions perhaps, but they can still engage in these really long drawn out fights, and they've taken a ton of casualties, Isengard, in this fight, and in retrospect they probably have the least attractive entryway into the city when you consider this over here. Like, you can see the Minhiriath sharpshooters and Dunedain rangers. Isengard just really having to accept their fate here, charging forward, and in much the way that a settlement should. Very, very nasty defensive position, funneling the attackers right where they need to go. Shooting into them over here. Uruk-hai crossmen still back here. There's still Uruk-hai pikemen outside, but I mean, it's really grisly over here for Isengard. Wardens of the North getting into position as well. And yeah, a combination of Arthedain's archers and Cardolan's crossbows is a very, very scary one if you're in a settlement like this, where you can really make the most of your ranged units. And I think that is, so far, what is proving to be the difference. The announcer still thinks the attackers are going to win this, which I suppose is a sign of how big a numbers advantage the attackers had. But the problem is they haven't really made too much in the way of progress. Like, no one's really broken through. The fact that Mordor are the ones looking most likely to do that is saying an awful lot, considering how Mordor started this particular fight. There's still so many pikes for them to try and force their way through over here, and crossbowmen in melee are not going to be sufficient to do that with. And there's still the Cardolan Dunedain Rangers. Ooh. Well, that's interesting. We have the Isengard Ballista scything through that front line, but again, you're quite likely to rout your own men by doing that. We do have some wargs that have pushed their way into the settlement now from the Steward of Dale. And Mordor, they have been victorious over here pretty much. I mean, this one unit of Dunedain Peacekeepers that's left is not going to be enough to defeat the Temple Executioners, who don't have a scratch on them. It goes to show how powerful that a unit like that really is in a situation where it's at its most comfortable. And like I said, even without the armour upgrade, it's done that. One of the very few rivals to the Noldorin Blade Masters for that particular title. But over here, Isengard needs support. The Fornost Terrain defenders are turning around to stop the Warg skirmishers. But the Warg skirmishers just going to make a beeline here, straight for the town centre by the looks of things. No, they're not. I mean, that's probably wise. If they do go into the town centre, they could actually make some of these units return from routing, which would give the defenders even more So what are the Wargs going to do? I mean, they've broken into the settlement, but what now? They need to make something happen here, because the attackers, they don't have infinite manpower. There's javelins flying all over the place, the plentiful units of Snaga skirmishers. But still, the attackers are going to be the ones taking the most damage here, as the Illuminous Gate Guards and the Arthedain Marksmen hold the line for the crossbows, the Wardens of the North and the Rangers to tee off into the Uruk-hai attackers. Getting towards the business end of this fight now, because we will start to see the attackers break through in a couple of areas, I think, but do they have enough left to finish the defenders off? I don't know, again, even with those nasty ballista bolts that hit this front line, there just isn't enough of the attackers left to make anything happen over here. The Uruk-hai crossbow is finally broken in melee. There's still that one drummer he's doing his best, bless him. He's trying to inspire his friends, but unfortunately his friends are all dead. And he will soon be joining them. While over here, Temple Executioners still hanging around. DUNEDAIN Shadow Bows are here. Temple Guard are now down here on the lower ground. Only 6 of them remaining, mind you. What have we got going on over here? Warg Skirmishers charging in there to the Minhiriath Sharpshooters, which is probably the only thing they can hope to do here, because if they stay at range for too long, those bolts are going to be very, very deadly. Trying to just cycle charge in and out here, but the Wargs are largely bottled up at this point. That's the problem. Like, the Wargs needed to make something happen quite quickly. The defenders have now readjusted, and the defenders can afford to put a unit like this in the way of the Wargs to stop them from doing something. The Minhiriath archers are also firing away. Let's go and see what's happening with Isengard over on this side. DUNEDAIN Rangers still firing, which, again, Doloralf, his 2 units of DUNEDAIN Rangers, I can only imagine have gotten an ungodly amount of kills across the span of this match, because they've managed to get themselves into ideal positions to do tons of damage to Isengard's army as it moves forward. Wardens of the North adding themselves to the front line, as well as those Minhiriath Sharpshooters pulling out those maces. How much manpower does Isengard really have left? Not an awful lot is what I'm guessing. The DUNEDAIN Rangers trying to get into a loose formation, but those Uruk-hai crossbows over there on the walls, finally with some sort of response to the DUNEDAIN Rangers. And finally the Rangers being given a taste of their own medicine. And while these pikemen being peeled off from this front line, there's still a unit of Isengard ballista crew to deal with, but that won't take much. Well, I mean, quite a few depleted units. Both the Hearthguard and Amon Sul and the Dismounted Knights of Illuminus are now down into the teens in terms of unit strength. There's the Cardland General over there. Finishing off what's left of the Nazkai, only 2 of them, a banner carrier and the officer. It's only a matter of time before they are dealt with as well. And the ballista crew, even with the numbers being as they are, the ballista crew will be no match for Dismounted Knights of Illuminus. These Wargs still running around inside the settlement now, going after the DUNEDAIN Peacekeepers, but can Stuartdale actually do anything useful with these Warg skirmishers? I don't really know. Down here, some Arthedain Man-at-Arms. Still, these DUNEDAIN Shadow Bows are firing. I'm not sure what these Temple Executioners are doing. They need to move. Is it possible the Mordor player crashed? Maybe, because, I mean, these Temple Executioners could have moved off to try and at least help the Wargs in their attempt to make something happen over here. I'm not sure. Again, it's Temple Executioners, though. That could have been significant. As it is, they're just kind of there. Because can you imagine the Temple Executioners attacking this front line from the back? That would be pretty devastating. The Wardens of the North. Those javelins, though, doing the business. Can Isengard turn this around with their ranged units? Out of ammunition on those crossbows by the looks of things. Is that a unit of fresh Nazkai heading up onto the walls? It is. 64 Nazkai. That's a pretty big deal indeed. In come some DUNEDAIN Rangers into melee. There's a lot of dead gate guards now, their blue capes standing out against the snow. The Minhiriath Sharpshooters though, and this is the thing, I think the defenders have, all of a sudden in the late game, they've allowed the attackers to have free reign in the ranged fight. They've allowed the Snaga skirmishers and the Uruk-hai crossbows to do as they will, which is a very dangerous thing to do, to be honest with you. Maybe getting a little bit greedy, trying to continuously shoot into the side of that front line when it was, they would have won if it just was a straight up fight. As it is, Oof. Nazkai getting back down off the wall now. Urukai Crossman charging into melee. That may still prove to be the difference between the two sides. I mean, it's a very close fight. But without the Temple Executioners moving to support their ally, do they have enough to really make something happen here? The attackers. I don't know. With the Temple Executioners, I'd actually say yes. Without them, I would say hard no. Like, it's the strongest unit they have left, even stronger than the Nazkai. Well, the Nazkai are fresh, which is a bit of a difference, but of the two units, the Temple Executioners will be more useful in this situation because their defensive skill is higher. They can keep themselves alive a little bit better. The fact that there's still a unit of Minhiriath sharpshooters firing away is a significant addition as well. Very, very close, though. The battle will be decided by very fine margins indeed. Some depleted pikes on their way over, but again, like, this could be the margin by which the battle is decided. 29 pikes will be useful for keeping this Isengard push at bay, because now Isengard victory seems certain. And again, late game pikemen. Isengard have got more pikes than the defenders at this point, which means they can keep them at arm's length. 29 Arthedain pikemen is not going to be enough to change that, and all of a sudden this front line is looking far less convincing. Is it to the extent that it can give the attackers the win, though? Forward come the Fornost Rain defenders. 78 of them. Again, I mean, 78 is a decent number, but they're heavy spearmen, which maybe not the most damaging thing in the world. They'll be very vulnerable to something like the Nazkai as well. There goes the Cardinal General, shanked actually by the Isengard Ballista crew of all things. So the Hearthguard of Amon-Sul may be left a little bit exposed down here, and all of a sudden Isengard using the mighty Ballista crew. Warg skirmishers are perpetually routing now, which is unfortunate for them. But the Hearthguard of Amon-Sul and the Warns of Tir Gorthad getting a little bit too big for their boots, and now they're just being overwhelmed by the Isengard Ballista crew. This is a madness. Man. Crazy. Yep, they're still routing. What about the Temple Executioners? Temple Executioners are still down there. 52 of them attacking the town centre right now. I mean, they'd carve their way through that and then the defenders would be gone. So, I mean, if the attackers do go on to lose this fight, you would have to say that that would be a very key factor. But honestly, I think even without the Temple Executioners, they might just be fine. That unit of 64 Nazkai that was being kept in the back pocket might be all that's required here for Isengard to pull the win out of the bag. We all know how powerful the Nazkai can be after all. Armour piercing, and considering the armoured nature of all the defenders at this point, they are going to be ideally placed to do some damage. The sharpshooters are now out of ammunition, which is a bad sign for the defenders. They needed more bolts to find their way into this Isengard blob. They will get into melee and they'll try and do a job with their maces, but I don't know if that's going to be enough. There is another unit of pikes in there as well, I think. 21 pikemen? Is there only 21 pikes in there? I guess so. Fornost Rain defenders as well. What a strange match, because for the longest time it looked like Isengard were getting absolutely destroyed. I mean, Hiriath archers trying to do their best as well. But I guess it does go to show that Isengard, they are resilient. While over here, some Dunedain Rangers, 6 of them, stopping the inexorable march of the mighty Ballista crew after killing off Cardlin's general. Are they going to be able to finish off these Isengard Ballistas, these Dunedain Rangers as well? They should, because they'll be able to outnumber them, and then, as if that wasn't enough, they'll be able to get into melee and stop those Minhiriath archers from firing, which will probably be the final nail in the defender's coffin, to be honest with you, because they do need range support if they're going to win that fight, and that's as good as it gets for the defenders. So maybe they dumped too much of their missile power into the attackers too early. They used a lot of their ammunition very, very quickly, and maybe now they're paying for that. Is very possible. You have to give the attackers a good deal of credit as well, because things were looking Like, the initiative was with the defenders early on. I felt that cavalry sally out was decent. Their ranged units were doing a lot of damage, which can be a very disheartening sight. There's the ballista crew chasing off the archers, and it's enough to rout them as well. This ballista crew, what heroes. Doing the absolute business. We are into the very final phases of this fight now. Just a cursory glance around the settlement. That is clearly a ballista bolt that did that. Nothing really left over here except for some dismounted Knights of Illuminus, only 6 of them. Maybe another player that crashed. Who knows. Over here, Temple Executioners still there. Warg skirmishers that are routing. Finally, not perpetually routing on the same spot, moving around. Could be desyncs as well, to be fair. In fact, I think I recall just now, Eclipse did mention me that one player may have desynced, but I think that may be Mr. Sneakman, and he's only got like 16 soldiers left alive anyway, so not really the most important factor in the battle, it must be said. Viper action, he's only got 1 unit of Minhiriath archers left. The Dunedain Peacekeepers are still here as well, but this is going to be the final thing. So yeah, the attackers are going to win. The defensive line has crumbled, and now it's just a case of sealing the victory, taking the town centre, doing things the old-fashioned way, and a hard-fought victory for the attackers it will be as well. I'm sure that the Rangers got tons and tons of kills, but ultimately maybe they should have rationed out their resources a little bit, because it was clear towards the end that what they really needed more than anything was just 1 or 2 more units of sort of ranged units that were capable of breaking up that Isengard blob. As it was, they didn't have anything left because they used it too early. And yeah, in the end that may very well prove to be the difference. Minhiriath sharpshooters coming in as the Isengard army continues to move in a column towards the town, and victory for the forces of evil. The first evil victory, I think, in a siege like this that I've seen in a couple of weeks. So good for them. Especially considering the circumstances as well, because it was a very hard-fought evil team victory as well. Just having a look at the percentage of kills, yeah, very close, 2% in it. It looks more substantial because obviously the Orcs, 1% for the Orcs is a substantial amount more than 1% for the defenders, but still, close run thing. And it could have just been like Dollar Elf saving one of his units of rangers for a little bit later on, or even Cardland saving their rangers for a little bit later on. Could have been the thing to make all the difference in this fight. As it is, no such luck for them. Continuing to bear down on the defences here, Isengard. That unit of Nazkai, like, when I saw 64 Nazkai cresting over the palisade, I was like, ooh, that's going to be rough to deal with. It's 40 left, so I mean, to be fair, some of them have died, but they're such a devastating unit, the Nazkai, especially against armoured targets. And that's going to be pretty much that. The Minhiriath archers, I mean, they're in the town centre at this point, so they're going to have to be dealt with. Minotaur Romen gatekeepers as well, I think, have an inspiration aura. They're going to fight to the last man for their homes. It very much has a sort of Cardolan aesthetic, I think, this village. Sort of a nice sleepy place, although now it's going to be turned into an Orc labour camp, I'm sure. So a little bit less picturesque in the future. Not exactly the sort of thing you want to see on a postcard. Still an Arthedain unit in there as well. Some dismounted Knights of Illuminas, which may go some way to determining why Isengard haven't just brushed this final bit of opposition aside just yet. So in the end, those Temple Executioners were not even necessary. Oof. Yeah, good fight this, and I like the map, honestly. I think it is a nice defensive map. It's a map where I think ranged units are the key, because both the attackers and the defenders can use their ranged units very effectively on a map that has both of these defensive positions and is this open. And I feel as though that is what did make the difference, because the attackers, the defenders I should say, while the defenders were very damaging with their archers, I think maybe they were a little bit too eager to use them, and they needed to spread out their usage a little bit more. As it was, though, a very, very good battle. I don't think anyone really did anything too wrong. I mean, Mordor early on were under the cosh, but they survived. You know, that sort of a player can go to pieces when they're subjected to that sort of cavalry pressure, when they don't really have an ideal army for dealing with it. And Mordor did very well, and his allies did come to his aid, to be fair, with those warg skirmishes as well, to break up that cav sally out. Mr. Sneakman deserves credit for the cav sally out, as well as the defence against Mordor that he mounted for a long period of time. Dollar Elf with a ton of kills, of course, with those archers. Even though I would say maybe rationing out the ammunition would have been maybe a little bit better of an idea. You can't argue with the fact that he got tons and tons of kills, so, you know, in the end, maybe he did use his archers well, and maybe Viper Action could have saved one of his units of archers or crossbows for the end. I guess we'll never know. I mean, it's all ifs, ands, buts and maybes, because I think the defenders honestly did a very good job. It was just a case of the attackers. When the attackers don't make any mistakes in this sort of situation, when they have the numbers advantage, when they apply themselves well, it can be quite difficult to overcome them, and I feel as though that is kind of the case here as well. Like, 3 of these players, certainly, the 2 Isengard players and the Misty Mountains ones, are very familiar with the game, so it's unlikely you'll see them making like mistakes to the extent of that you would need for the defenders to maybe get a bit of a leg up in this sort of fight. So yeah, all the players played very well. I think no one really but yeah, the Isengard players I think deserve a special mention, because they were taking a lot of damage and they were still able to make that work for them. Speaking of which, let's see what did the damage for Isengard. The Ballista did very well, as you would expect in this situation. The settlement is nice and open for those bolts to go flying into those defensive positions, and without that, maybe the Misty Mountains wouldn't have been able to get in as far into the settlement as they did earlier on. Guards of Orthanc did okay, considering the fact they were sort of embroiled in that fight and getting pounded by ranger fire and catapult boulders. Nazkai were only committed later on, which is why they only got 94 kills, but still, the final nail in the defenders' coffin that they were, that was still very useful. Dunlending Clansmen with 221 kills. That's got to be the most amount of kills from a unit of Dunlending Clansmen I've seen. That is quite remarkable, honestly, because there's really no units on the defence that I would think the Dunlending Clansmen would have a significant melee advantage against, and yet here we are. Not bad at all, I have to say. BMK Overlord's army. Uruk-hai Crossmen doing very well, as you would expect. Crossbows are always going to be an important part of what Isengard do. Trolls of the White Hand, when they were committed forward, to be fair, they did get Isengard into the settlement finally. It cost them their lives, but they did manage to take quite a few men with them as well. Dunlending veterans, very mixed fortunes. Some of them got dumpstered, some of them did okay. And then the Snaga skirmishers. Like, the Snaga skirmishers were allowed to throw those javelins into that defensive position late on, and that was one of the things that did make the difference. So the Snaga skirmishers, cheap javelins, once again, proving themselves to be a very integral part of an orc army. Very, very useful indeed. But yeah, big thank you to Eclipse for this one. This is a very nice map, I have to say. It's always good to see a new map in action, especially, you know, like, I feel as though with the crashing lately, obviously a new map has always made me feel quite apprehensive about the battle as it happens, but I have to say, a lot of the new maps, even if I've had a lot of technical issues with them, a lot of them have been very, very good. And this is another one, like, obviously it is a sort of a generic settlement design for sort of a campaign scenario, but it's a very good one, honestly. Like I said, it's a little bit different as well as far as the siege goes, like very similar to the Elven Ruins map that we saw a couple of weeks ago. It's a little bit more open, so skirmishers take a little bit more precedence on both sides, but it is obviously still fortified, so it's a little bit more of a different situation than like a really heavily fortified castle or city where there's like walls and everything is a bit narrow, and you know, it's a little bit more open, and I kind of prefer that, because I feel as though that it offers both the attackers and the defenders a little bit more license to be a bit more creative, whereas in like a closed city, for example, Minas Tirith, there's only so many ways you can play that map, to be honest with you. It's, if you don't do certain things on the attack or the defence, you're just actively hamstringing your own chances of winning the game. So, whereas on this, you can be a little bit more creative with your skirmishes. You can, yeah, I like this map. It's a good one. So, big thank you to Eclipse. I think Eclipse has also posted this up on his podcast channel on the Discord. So, if you want to hear the opinions of a player who is actually in this game, commentating on it, then feel free to go over there. Obviously, the Discord is the place to be if you want to get involved with anything Reforged, and any of the various sort of categories of Reforged as well, like the clans that are involved, and also places like Silmarillion as well, which is sort of started up with a sort of splinter thing from Reforged as well. So yeah, big thank you to Eclipse, big thank you to all the players that were involved. The next battle that I do, I'm not quite sure. It might be a Silmarillion one again, although I think I need to update my Silmarillion files so that I'm compatible with that one, and I don't think I'm able to do so with the distribution method at the moment, so we'll see. The next battle could be a Silmarillion battle, or it could be another Reforged one. I do have a few ones from Reforged that I could do. So yeah, we'll see. Again, it kind of depends on time as well, because obviously we're at the part of the year now. December, there's a few coursework deadlines here and there, so it may have to be like another fairly small battle just to sort of tide me over until the winter break begins on the 13th. So yeah, regardless, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.